When we picture the oil business, we picture the giants whose names are on the petrol stations or the vast national companies that own the great desert fields. But there is another kind of oil company, one whose name you have almost certainly never seen on a sign, and yet without it, a great deal of the world's oil would simply stay in the ground. It is the company the oil giants themselves quietly call when they need to actually find the oil and get it out. And for most of a century, the biggest of those companies has been Schlumberger. This is a series about the companies that run the world and the rivals they left behind. Today it is Schlumberger, now often just called SLB, and it is the clearest example on this whole list of a beautiful and underappreciated kind of business. Not digging for the gold yourself, but selling the picks and shovels to everyone who does. In an industry full of famous, flag-waving giants, this is the quiet firm that sells them all their tools. To understand it, you have to understand a strange fact about oil. Owning the land above an oil field tells you almost nothing. The oil is trapped, often kilometers down, inside rock you cannot see, under enormous pressure in a maze of geology that is fiendishly difficult to read. The hardest part of the oil business was never really the digging. It was the knowing. Knowing where the oil is, how much there is, and how on earth to coax it up through kilometers of stone without wasting a fortune. And that is the problem Schlumberger was built to solve. Back in the 1920s, two French brothers had an idea that sounds simple now and was revolutionary then. They lowered electrical instruments down a borehole and used the readings to map the rock far below to see, in effect, where the oil actually was. It was the beginning of an entire science of measuring and imaging the deep underground, and Schlumberger has been the leading name in that science, in one form or another, ever since. So think about the relationship this creates. When an oil giant, even one as mighty as Aramco or Exxon, wants to drill a difficult new field, it very often does not do the hardest technical work itself. It hires a services company. That company brings the sensors that read the rock, the technology to steer a drill sideways through a thin layer of oil-bearing stone kilometers underground, the science of fracturing rock to release what is trapped inside. Schlumberger is, above all others, that company. This is what people mean by picks and shovels. In any gold rush, some prospectors get rich and most do not. But the person selling the tools does well, no matter who strikes it lucky. Schlumberger does not take the enormous gamble of owning an oil field, betting billions that a particular patch of ground holds treasure. It sells its expertise to everyone who takes that gamble, on almost every field, all over the world. It profits from the activity of drilling itself, not from the luck of any single well. And the scale of that is genuinely global. Schlumberger operates in dozens upon dozens of countries, employs a small city's worth of engineers, and for decades has been the largest oilfield services company on the planet. When there is drilling happening almost anywhere in the world, from the deserts of the Middle East to the deep waters of Brazil, there is a very good chance that Schlumberger's technology and Schlumberger's people are somewhere in the middle of it. So who competes with the master toolmaker? Here the story is, once again, not a monopoly but a tight and fierce club. Schlumberger's great rival is Halliburton, an American giant whose name many people know, often for reasons tangled up with politics and war, and which is a formidable competitor, especially in North America. Behind them sits a third major force, Baker Hughes. Together these three dominate the business of oilfield services, each enormous, each specialized, locked in constant competition for the contracts of the world's drillers. But notice how similar the shape of this is to other stories on this list. It is not one company standing alone. It is a small handful of giants, an oligopoly, that between them provide the essential expertise an entire industry cannot function without. If all three of these services companies vanished tomorrow, the great oil majors, for all their size and wealth, would suddenly find much of the world's most difficult oil far harder and far more expensive to reach. The tool sellers are quietly indispensable. And this points to the strange power of the picks and shovels position. Schlumberger is, in a sense, insulated from the thing that terrifies oil investors most, the wild swings in the price of oil itself. Whether the oil that comes up is worth a lot or a little, the drilling still requires its tools and its expertise. Its fortunes rise and fall, not with the price of a barrel, but with the sheer amount of drilling and searching happening in the world, which is a subtly different and often steadier kind of bet. But even the toolmaker cannot fully escape the great shadow over this entire industry, which is the slow shift away from fossil fuels. And here, Schlumberger has made a fascinating move. It has begun quite deliberately to reposition itself, changing its public identity towards simply SLB and describing itself less as an oil services firm and more as a broad energy technology company, pushing into digital tools and into technologies like capturing carbon and tapping the heat of the earth itself. So, the uncomfortable question this series keeps returning to appears here in a quieter, more technical form. So much of the world's ability to actually extract its energy is concentrated in the specialized knowledge of a mere handful of companies. We rightly worry about who owns the oil. We think far less about who owns the expertise to lift it, which is arguably just as critical a choke point and far more hidden from public view. And that is the deeper lesson in one of its most practical forms. In almost every great and dramatic industry, there is a quieter business hiding one layer beneath the surface. The company that provides the essential tools and know-how that the famous giants depend on. It rarely gets the headlines or the glory or the blame. It simply takes its steady cut of all the activity, whoever happens to be winning. Schlumberger spent a century mastering the art of seeing into the earth, and in doing so, quietly became one of the companies the entire modern world is built to depend on.